Recording. This is live via the interweb.
Now you go.
We're making a sacrifice to the god, the net, tonight, and we'll be broadcasting this live throughout the United States. Yeah. So, okay, I want to thank some people for helping me do the magazine, Owl Magazine. Owl Magazine is a miscellany, a compendium of miscellany and marginalia and poems and scans. And I want to thank for letting this event happen, letting the magazine happen, which I plan to continue. So please take a look in the back. You'll see issues back there where I see a bearded face, sort of spookily lit. It's $5, and I plan to keep doing it forever. So, Milwaukee artists and other artists that have been involved with a coterie of Milwaukee artists are involved with it, and I want to thank Zav LaPlay, namely, which I know it embarrasses him, but I would very much like to thank him for allowing this to be possible, and for making this possible, which is sort of a installation in itself, only it doesn't have all the pretension that installations tend to have sometimes. It's actually literally a living installation. And you could call Zav a walking installation in another sense. But I would like to thank him very much for helping and doing the technical aspect. And I want to thank Miles Harbury for helping me so much put together the issue and get it set, which is also, he's back there by the issues, for helping me print it and lay out and driving me around. In fact, I should probably thank just about everyone here for driving me around. Okay, and I also want to thank Elizabeth Bars, who couldn't make it, and David Baptiste Chirot, who's in the issue, and Robert Thomas, who's in the issue, and you should take a look at it. But most of all, I want to thank the performers, and we'll be listening to 4 pieces tonight. We'll be listening first to Cynthia Spencer and Chelsea Tedeschi. I can never say your name right. Tedeschi. I'm sorry. It's just that you see so much print, you forget how to pronounce things. People are constantly correcting me. And so they're going to be performing, and then I would like to thank Neil Gravander and Mike Hauser, who will be doing a piece together. And then Stephanie Barber, who will be joining us live via landline, primitive Skype, which is a new medium. It's very hot. It's post-day talk radio, and very post. And we're very excited to have her read from her manuscript, Some Photographs, which is a stunning and astounding manuscript. And she'll be calling us from Baltimore as soon as Chelsea and Cynthia perform. And just as a little means of introduction for their piece, Chelsea and Cynthia are both involved in a lot of collaboration in the city, and they both organized the Cloudburst Reading Series with Edwin Perry. They organized the Midwest Small Press Fest, also with Edwin, which is a curated book fair, bookmaking workshop, poetic and literary discussions, performances, etc. Chelsea's chapbooks include, do you have any here for sale, Chelsea? Are you peddling wares? No. Well, you can find her chapbooks. I like the titles. I just want to read some of them. Suddenly You're Naked and Wandering Through Pasturage with Edwin Perry. Finn with Bethany Price. Heel Dragger with Edwin Perry. There Exists with Cynthia Spencer. You See the Way I Pull Aside. I like that title a lot. Gritty Silk Press. An Incomplete Handbook, also Gritty Silk Press. And Chelsea has a chapbook, which I don't have in my collection. Which, let's see, what is the name of your chapbook again? And I can't remember it because I don't have it.
I don't know.
Don't tell me. What is it?
We'll talk about it later.
Oh, in what sequence will my parts exist?
Cynthia's.
That's what I just said.
No.
Did I say Chelsea when I meant to say Cynthia?
Yeah,
It's the
do
C's.
that every time.
I'm sorry. Well, by means of introduction, I would like to thank them for all the work they've done to bring a lot of excellent poets in the city and organize a lot of stuff. And they will be forming a piece tonight. And I'm sorry to keep referring to you. What's the name of the piece again? It's going to be hard to repeat, isn't it?
Oh, wait, we're doing it like that? Okay. Inevitably, Areola Tufts munificently arranges humming hibiscus.
Okay, thank you. Please welcome Chelsea and Cynthia.
There's
Just arrange
two,
yourself however you
apparently.
feel.
No, this works. It's good.
Here's the second one. The second
Inevitably,
A.
eo, la, areola, tufts,
U.
if, nt,
E.
munificently,
A.
nj,
S.
arranges,
E.
humming,
Esk. Us.
hibiscus. Inevitably, areola tufts munificently arranges humming hibiscus. Inevitably, areola, tufts, munificently, arranges, humming, hibiscus.
In.
Ev,
It.
Ub,
Li.
air,
E.
O,
La.
tufts,
Mu.
nif,
Ni.
sit,
E.
a,
Orange.
s,
Hum.
ming,
Hip.
b,
Skus.
in,
Ev.
it,
Ab.
li,
Air.
re,
O.
la,
Tufts.
mu,
If.
is,
Li.
a,
E.
s,
Range.
hum,
Hum.
ing, hibiscus. Inevitably, aerial tufts munificently arranges humming hibiscus. Humming areola tufts munificently, inevitably arranges hibiscus. Hibiscus areola tufts humming inevitably munificently arranges hibiscus areola tufts inevitably munificently humming munificently inevitably areola tufts arranges humming hibiscus. Areola tufts inevitably humming munificently arranges hibiscus. Tufts areola humming munificently inevitably arranges hibiscus. Inevitably, areola tufts munificently arranges humming hibiscus.
Thank you. That was fantastic. Could I have my Ed McMahon, please? Zav? We're going to be making a very special call now. Host Day Talk. Yeah, we're going to be calling. We're very excited to have. We're going to have in a moment on the line here Stephanie Barber, and I wrote a small introduction for her.
So we're calling her?
Yeah, in a second. I'm going to talk to her. Can you get it ready?
Yeah.
Now I'm gone. Wonder why I'm gone.
I brought you down because you're going to be too loud.
Oh.
Keep talking.
Should I talk to something else? Don't call her yet.
Oh.
Give me a second before you call, and then I'll tell you. I wrote this thing to introduce her.
What if she's just, okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to introduce who we're calling right now. Our next performer is Stephanie Barber, who we'll be talking to live over the telephone. I would say, are you okay? Okay. Stephanie Barber is easily one of the most, if not the most prolific artists that I've known. She's one of those rare artists like Schwitters or Joseph Cornell or Stein whose work goes from one medium to another, and it's not simply for the sake of a meta of the moment medium commentary. And I would say that in Stephanie's work, the medium is the message, yeah, but the medium also has meaning, and the human is the medium through which the medium says what it is, if that makes sense. Which it does. It is kind of like that, isn't it? Thanks, Paul. Maybe you should be the McMahon here. The poetics McMahon. Easy. Primarily, she's known as a filmmaker. Stephanie taught here in Milwaukee for years, and her films have always been poems. She uses images like words as opposed to vice versa. And by isolating each medium's formal tropes that she works in, she creates an interesting tension between people and the things that they use. The terrible, funny human anonymity that's created the trope, and the way that those experiences make what we think of as a particular medium. And there's also this tremendous, lovely sadness and funniness at the same time, like Charlie Chaplin, that exists in her work. And she's been in a lot of museums, and she's made a lot of films, including Meaning and Derision, Bus Chance. Again, I love these titles, and I know you're thinking to yourself, like, why is he rattling off all these titles? Like, I'm not going to look this up. But you should look it up. You should look it up because, you know, if you want to affirm your life and be interested in things, you should look it up, and I think this work's exciting. So some of her titles are To the Horse Dream of Arms, Razor's Edge, a collaboration with Xav Laplay. I love this title. The Hunch That Caused the Winning Streak and Fought the Doldrums Mightily. The Inversion, Transcription, Evening Track, and a Tractor. One of her famous films, Dwarfs the Sea. My personal favorite, Total Power, Dead, Dead, Dead. Letters, Notes. They Invented Machines, Dogs, The Flower, the Boy, The Librarian, Ship Film, Angus Mustang, and numerous others. Stephanie has written haiku continually for about 6 years on Facebook. That's a funny sentence by itself. And she recently collaborated with, oh wait, I forgot something else that's important because there's so much stuff she's done. Oh, she also did something called lawn poems, which are these incredible photographs of poems that she put on the lawn, like in Fast Times at Richmond High, where they burn the message on the kind of like that. She made these incredible poems on lawns, and there were pictures taken of them, and there's been a booklet that you can access online via Publishing Genius Press, and I think they're really cool and they're worth looking at. So anyway, I could go on and on about it, and I won't. But she recently collaborated with Bonnie Jones in September. She did a 12-hour collaborative improvisation at the Reverse Space in Brooklyn called Text Improvisation. And she will be reading from her manuscript, which is included in the first issue of OW, an excerpt, which I think will be published very soon. And it's a stunning manuscript, and it's called Some Photographs. So we will now be calling Miss Stephanie Barber to read from her manuscript, Some Photographs, live in Baltimore. We'll be attempting contact right now. We're having technical difficulties.
3744135.
I think so. Can we go to the Skype feed, Nick? Can you bring down the... Nick? There's no Nick, I actually just made that up. There wasn't anyone named Nick.
You hear it?
You're... Turn off my mic.
I think that's their number.
Maybe we'll get a different...
Hello.
Hello, Stephanie.
Hello, everybody. I will just begin to read to you. I guess we are doing it. They're all singing. They're all men, and they're all singing. 4 of the men are wearing glasses. 4 of the 14. They're dressed up like for a show, but they look like amateurs. They're wearing the kinds of ancient Egyptian headpieces one makes out of rolled-up towels. The photograph is very beautiful, with soft, true hues and flecks of white showing its age. A couple in the 1970s getting water from a pump well. They seem to be at some sort of public campground. The woman is washing 2 yellow dishes, and the man is eating from a third. In the lower right-hand corner, you can see a bit of bare foot, suggesting a possible third eater. This one is of a hand that says, pointing to a sign that says, "Don't disappoint." I tried to guess what this sign would say if 9 out of 17 letters weren't missing, and I think I've settled on Monty's Joyful Grill. Color Wars or Field Day or something. Being a child was like 14 years of the first day at a new job. It doesn't look like Murraysville Machinery Corporation did too well for itself from this. The hope that is needed here for balance and palatability may be evidenced in this photograph of a tender, relaxed wrist and bit of palm in the sunshine. Oh, I remember this photograph. I remember she was always trying to quit smoking. I remember she had a dream about Manatee and how they got so mangled by the boat motors. There are glass-bottomed boats in Crystal River, Florida. Phrases that begin, and by day, dolphins frolic in the... I think this is a child's cardboard diorama, but I am open to the possibility of a previously undiscovered land. A cargo truck full of pickup truck caps. Somewhere there is an idiom, don't put another head on your head, and that does seem like a good way to avoid some pain, but it lacks the surprising color blocking of this visual iteration. Maybe this woman was about to say something horrible to the man on her right. You can just see the left side of his face sort of preparing for defense. I think this is the foxglove, but I sometimes mix up foxglove and hollyhocks. Kim Sue pulled her thumb and 4 fingers together to imitate a fox's paw, and then mimed inserting these paws into the delicate speckled blossom of this tall floral wonder. I was thankful. It doesn't matter much in the photos, but I think they are biennial. Such a great Christmas photo with the mom half smiling and the baby with a crinkled up face crying, the dad looking at the couch, and 2 older kids staring straight into the camera with unmistakable terror. It says, Merry Christmas and best wishes for the coming year, with the word year underlined with a repeating ribbon flourish, lessening with length as it heads to the end of the photo. We are different here in the present. Who Dean is, I just don't know, but this is a picture of him that has been colorized. His cheeks are so rosy, and the color of his tie has run onto his shirt collar. This is so much snow I started crying looking at it, but it is also a photograph of God, though he has his face turned mostly away. Why does God recoil from every form of touch? This is a photograph of soft young rabbits on a long, thick grass carpet, edged by the clean sands of a perfectly blue ocean in the sun. It is surprising, the modernist slices of color, the green and white and rabbit-speckled blue. The grass is saying something about the love which departs the earth, something about where it goes, but I can't quite hear every word. The grass speaks so quietly, it's almost as if it's just silent. 3 men in raincoats looking right at the camera, wet and angry. I would fain take this breath and cast it aside with the gesture guarantee regret for the insurance policy purchased in that dream with the rickshaw tender. This photo, however, is not that assurance. I didn't want to look at this photograph for a long time. The green carpet fading to a purple hue, the mirror above the fireplace crooked. You can see the man who's taking the photograph in the crooked mirror. He is crooked too. The carpet, the couch, the crooked mirror, the fold-out card table. It's all too much for me. This is my mother. She is at Coney Island with her 3 dogs. It is a long shot, and she is standing beneath the sign for the Shoot the Freak exhibit. It is an upsetting photograph my stepfather sent me for Christmas some years back. One of the dogs, Roxy, died a year after the photograph was taken. The dogs are less protective of her freakishness than they are freakish with her, which is better, really, but not quite the solace required for such an emulsive blow. This is a photo of an opening at a gallery. People are looking good. You can see 8 of them in this picture and most of one painting on the wall. The painting is of a horse. I think horse means anger. The second woman on the left, is looking right at the camera. This picture could be England. England or taken in England. This is a huge motherfucking pile of super sad shit. A boy's profile and the profile of 2 stuffed animals all looking together at something we'll never see. This is a photograph of an ocean wave. The photographer must have been a surfer or on a boat or in some way able to be underneath the wave as it is creating its tunnel. It is a huge wave. You've all seen this photograph or one similar. The wave makes a canopy, all the walls and floor. You're inside the water tunnel like you've been in the past. In the past, you were in 300,000 water tunnels, squirming through the universe and all the notions of existence. Remember? I read recently about sound waves moving through molecules, needing to move through molecules to exist, and not being able to move through the outer space. I imagine giant ocean waves in the outer space, foiled by the dark energy, fragmented and 3-dimensionally cubist, 10-dimensionally cubist, with motion as fragmented as the waves. I am afraid of giant waves. This is you. Look at the way your hands are draped in your lap. Kids and a dog. Knickknacks on an end table, which spell out, "Give up now." The dog looks guilty, like he might know something about the closed door there on the right. This one is out of focus. Areas of blue, like maybe sky, and areas of green, like maybe grass, where snakes lie and wait. I think that is a good spot to end. It's very enjoyable to read in this way, but also painfully lonely and alienating. So I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your celebration for the OW.
Thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate it.
Thank
fantastic.
You all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yes. I love that feedback. Tone's great. Thank you. That was Stephanie Barber reading descriptions of photographs over the telephone. And next up will be Mr. Mike Hauser and Neil Gravander. We'll be doing a project together. Neil is coming this way with a giant table full of various apparatus. That's big to me. It's relative, but it's still large. It's up to you. I'm going to say a few things about both of you, if it's not too embarrassing. Okay. Mike Hauser is a poet, and he was also briefly the host of the radio program here, Hauser, which was canceled after one season by the show's producer, also oddly named Mike Hauser. I checked the files, and it was canceled. There was no reason given for that. But also, Mike has put out a number of chapbooks. He's been published in various places. His poems are very funny. and they're not funny in a cheap way either. His books include Dirty Movies Late at Night, published by Russ Buckle, Kretz, Kretz, Kretz by Russ Buckle, and Psychic Headset, which is on Rob Bauman's press, which is like, for some reason escapes me too. Suddenly I can't remember anything. And with Carl Safran, Mike has had a reading series over the years, in case you don't know who Mike is, which I'm sure some of you do. And he's brought tons of amazing poets to the city. He is a treasure. And Neil Gravander, who you also know as the Project Lucky Bone, perhaps. Neil uses different media and medium manipulations in his work. He crosses mediums and he scrambles them. There's a confluence between sound and meaning, and also very much a slapstick element in Neil's work, which you might not like, a sort of Spike Jones post-tonal song dismemberment thing. That sounded like a blurb, didn't it? Spike Jones post-tonal song dismemberment. I need more adjectives for that to be a blurb. And he's made dozens and dozens of beautiful handmade CDs of his recordings, and you should ask him about his work or come see him. Many of the different ways that he has manipulated home entertainment systems to be entertaining, but in a much more, I don't know, occasionally disturbing way. Mike, I'm going to turn the mic over to you. Mr. Michael Hauser and Mr. Neil Gravander will now be performing a piece entitled
Hello. How's everybody doing tonight?
Mike, you're gonna have to keep the crowd going for a little while. I just realized I forgot my power strips at home, so Zob's trying to help me out here with that one. Sorry, guys. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? All right.
Just like Neo. That's what happens.
All right. Well, while Neil's looking for his power strip, I'm gonna tell you a story about. I was on break at my job once. My job is very frustrating, and I get very bored, and surprisingly not too horny, because usually when I get bored, I get really horny for some reason, and like math usually makes me horny too for some reason. I think like in general abstraction makes me really horny, but like I was just having a really bad night. I work at a call center which shall remain unnamed. And it was, yeah, I mean, people know, but like it was like my final break of the night, and I just wanted a Twix bar like really bad. It was like what I needed to get me through the rest of the night, like 2 hours or whatever of my shift. And so I go down to the convenience store on 3rd Street, and it's like. There's a line there, and there's never a line in this convenience store. But anyway, I'm like in line, but I realized that the Twix bar is like, say I'm like standing here, the Twix bar is like where the candy display is, kind of like over that way, and I have to step out of line to grab it. Well, I step out of line, and I like step backwards, and I step on like a dude's toe, and I like felt a dude's toe underneath my heel, and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, and he kind of, he appeared to be really hurt originally, and I didn't feel a lot of my weight go down on his toe, but he appeared to be really hurt, and he like walked over to the counter and kind of braced himself and like took one of his sandals off and was like feeling his toe, and I'm like, are you okay? And he's like, it's okay. And he had a 4-pack of Milwaukee's Best Ice Tall Boys that he was holding, and he handed me his 4-pack of Milwaukee's Best Ice Tall Boys to hold. And so now I'm standing there holding this pack of Milwaukee's Best Tall Boys, and I'm like, you know, what's up? And I try to hand them back to him, and he's kind of, I'm starting to suspect that he's kind of trying to, as they say, game me. I'm starting to suspect that he's trying to game me because I attempt to hand the 4-pack of Milwaukee's Best Ice back to him, and he says, that's okay. which it's like, what does this "that's okay" mean? Like, is he giving it to me? Because it's like, you haven't purchased it, dude, so you can't really give it to me. And I realize, of course, that he's planning on having me purchase this 4-pack of Milwaukee's Best Ice for him. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I barely put any of my, like, admittedly ample weight on this person. I did not break his toe or what fucking ever. And I just want to buy, like, this Twix bar. I apologized profusely to him. And so I take the Milwaukee's Best Ice 4-pack and the Twix bar up to the counter, and I put it down, and I say, just the Twix bar, and I pay for it really quick. I like hand this guy Yafi, who's the convenience store owner at the counter. I hand him $1. I start walking out, and then the guy starts following me like this. He just goes like ape shit because I refused to buy his pack of Milwaukee's Best Ice. And as he's following me across the street to where people from the call center where I work are sitting outside, milling around, having a smoke break, he's demanding to see my ID. And I'm like, no, leave me alone. I have to get back to my job. And then he's demanding to know my name. So I say, my name is Mike Hauser. I don't know why I told him my name. I don't know why I volunteered that information. I mean, it's a very generic name. It's not like he's going to look me up in the phone book and there would be only one Mike Hauser. My mother's maiden name is Maiko, which I think is like a shortening of like a Slavic name. And I mean, I'm pretty sure that I'm related to every Maiko in the state of Wisconsin because it was obviously just kind of etymologically amputated when they came to the port. But anyway, I'm walking across the street and he's like, I know your name. I have witnesses. I know your name. It's Mike House. And so I'm like walking into the parking garage in this facility where I work, and finally I turn around and I'm like, what do you want? And he's like, and he has his credit card and ID out, and he wants to see my credit card and ID, and he's like, you don't do that to somebody and walk away. And I'm like, I didn't do anything. And then finally the parking lot attendant walked up. And I was like, I have to go back to work. And I guess the convenience store owner ended up calling the police because he kept on harassing people. And the convenience store owner, whose name is Yafi, if you'll remember, told me that earlier in the day he was like harassing his kids. And so I heard about this from one of the supervisors where I work, named Katie. I'll withhold the surname to. Are we almost ready? Yeah. Okay.
I think we're ready.
Okay. The first piece, as you can see by me doing this, involves rocking. It's called Getting Ahead, Working for the Weekend. It's kind of meant to be an encouraging piece, or if you will, a motivational piece. And it was culled from the worst case scenario handbook for college, and sort of copied and pasted and collaged from that. And so, I mean, it's kind of a set of instructions, and it's rather, are we ready? Okay. It's rather S&M, I was going to say. Does that say farts? No. This is called Getting Ahead, Working for the Weekend. The key to getting ahead is the key to enriching your parts Bulk up your sandwich with loads of condiments. A hookup can be for friends who receive heavily patterned shampoo. Showers are prime areas in different locations. Comments such as, "I hope you have a better time than the others," or "vomiting in the bushes pre or post idle oxygen from the container to the nozzle" are helpful. Pronounce Nero, Erasmus, Descartes, Renoir, Dante, Confucius, Machiavelli, and Sun Tzu. Put several fork holes in the potato for an oxygen handout. Do not, by recalling the lyrics of a small blanket or yoga mat, express mild mommy or musty paddle pain. Remember that your belongings circulate the incense. Look for students with other names. Concentrate on staying in the lines. Comments might not be cinder blocks in the ice out of your gut reaction. Pull in details. Bird call from other passers-by. Wave your arms around, remembering special experiences. Deal with each horror in a waterproof bag. Make your own bed squeak. Be where the furniture spirits up state persistent oozing. Tell the emergency operator when it warms to put on bulky trousers, not shorts, and spread one long quick gulp around an energy bar. Close the curtains and put fainting email in your roommate's cooled oxygen furniture. Check for pizza box flames and conceal the parking tickets. Wear headphones plugged into your television on a thick piece of plywood resting on cinder blocks. Be your roommate's shadow microbes. You are unlikely to gain empathy, seldom banging your arms as you have. Lean over each side and apply PASS technique by looking through the glass window for prospective alternate sexual meanings. Write down words in swimming pools resting on cinder blocks in the shadow of a good pre or post more or less realistic looking complexion. Quickly write the container, wearing the skate, in a bottle of shampoo, in a waterproof bag. Replace the plate to divide a cozy workplace or oscillating fabric. Cut vertically to unscrew the switch plate. In such situations, remembering pleasurable experiences in the wall cavity, keep your brain on what just passed. Seal the item in a waterproof bag and drywall at the top of the room to designate a wide V shape through the pipeline to an empty transparent jewel case. Bounce a quarter on the jewel case, wearing t-shirts, and disclaim any liability of everyday life. Beverages expect to swim on the tissue surrounding the eye. Beverages are wandering aimlessly. Canned foods are content. Use the life preserver as a seat cover. Blame any remaining mess on mold. Unless a spot is not heavily trafficked under the administering eyeball, be sure the straps hang outside the bowl. Hold both bottles perpendicular and, annoying with the windows open, your roommate's valuable double-sided quarter-inch sponges. Reach the edges of the custodial no one in particular. Reluctantly contain other whenever possible. Lock your cell phone and refresh the garments. Dorm rooms are inside out in the back, and ensure hot currency on cologne-coated parties to distract Texas or perform a sunfire. When she knocks it over, write the bottle. Do not still squeak. Mention how great duct tape is. In such situations, construed of joining the group as it happens, remembering pleasurable experiences, you distracted and wired anything you might otherwise amount of, such as whole wheat bread. Later, when you feel your energy ebb, close your eyes and inhale chicken breast without a trace of pink or red. Avoid foods that will need an empty, transparent jewel case. Add colored paper behind the potato from a CD. You can run a curtain rod straight through the lyrics of all the songs you know. You can run a curtain rod throughout the United States, through the education and training of lifeguard, aquatic safety, and recreation personnel. You can run a curtain rod straight through the hole in the wall in the center of a book. You can run a curtain rod straight through cash, dead plants, empty soda cans, cinder blocks to gain 6 inches of storage room. Do I have this whole thing? Give yourself a just showered look. Burn incense or spray air freshener to create a cozy red-eyed picture of everybody. Sweep or vacuum the water above the level of the heart. Put on bulky trousers, not shorts. Curl one arm around your own private space. In the back, if you show up, may be easily confused, periodically alert distractions. Douse a sock with cologne. Use your socks as a bikini top. One lace goes through the end of each sock and is knotted at each end. You can run a curtain rod straight through each sock. Prepare and practice yourself. Avoid military-issue semi-opaque fabric. To discourage distinct pools of light, use a stapler or duct tape while talking animatedly or wandering aimlessly. The other lace, bird call, is impractical for prospective rioting, isopropyl alcohol. Place ice in a plastic bag in an empty jewel case in an empty cell. Hold the massive organization you are. Do we have time to do this other thing? It's like 5 minutes.
Let's do it.
All right. We're gonna power through. We're powering through.
Powerhousers.
All right.
Wait, let us get over here, Mike, and we want to see it too.
Let me know when you're ready, Neil.
Why is that doing that thing? Why is that looking like that? No, I don't. Made my clothes all weedy back. Let's try the oven cord.
Feel free to daydream about hot dogs while we're setting up.
Ready to go, yo.
All right. Put it in your spazotron, bro. This is called hot beef wieners. It's pretty self-explanatory. Are we ready?
Yes, we're going.
I remember symmetrical wieners. I remember moist buns. I remember Darth Vader. I remember meat slurry and soya bean. I remember a chicken carcass squeezed through metal grates and blasted with water. I remember rusk. But no, wait. Reflexive regurgitation of writing is a symptomal cousin of PDA, i.e., excessive displays of public affection. Like cuddling on the bus and just retching at the releasing at the center of the fake vomit of it all. It's like one hell of a heavy exchange in your gut, like an argument between your gut and your foot. This illustrates how the only positive course of action is immersion in a sensory deprivation tank. There is really not that much oppositional gooey stuff to these isolatory structures. Your lips regurgitate such remorse that I speak and I speak until I speak no more. I hang up the phone in this great little place with this great agreeable ambiance and this kind of awesome propensity for touching and sudden lack of inhibitions at the appearance and mingling of bodily fluids. If one's geometry feels out of touch, thus maximally dumped, we begin to perceive cardboard reasons for life. Signs either driven or not spat by some throughway of regurgitation kind of resembles tomato soup. Or do you like the music from King of Queens? I like to jam on Pop-Tarts while my bro stuffs sweaters in that space over there. Will you shock my nuts back to sense? To establish exchange, I continue, feebly humping it back to prison, puking on my jeans, leaving disgusting messages on the message board. I will puke, constitute, negotiate austere measures, all the while disgusting and rude munchkins called fat beef wieners hold forth, tangential yet, stridently non-committal. About fat beef wieners, the artists are only half right. We think they believe way too much in the firmity of the disjunction of these additives in the wieners. Trying to pull additives off the Subway platform, I let the writing get so meandering that it resembles nothing more or less than our city's production. But to sort of take it back to the start, these public displays of affectation hide in the strident humping forth, liturgical and bunny-eared out of some regurgitation I had previously fought against, then finally gave into, not quite strategically, but linearly. And I broke it on the edge of the bowl. There was an attempt at a flurf poem. Rick Warren's big panda speckled displays of public affectation leave a residual, not to mention sticky, icky, and yet purpose-driven scum on the lips during recitation or regurgitation. At SeaWorld, walruses get fat, bringing the mosquitoes to orgasm. Mo money, mo disgusting metal riffage. Pandas are asses. Shoot them in their face. Get a generous return on the regurgitation of prefigured hidey hole like mini golf. Really hugged, dense forestry, actually made of cues. Like some meandering regurgitation, we go then, you and I, on a journey to the center of psychiatry. Laughing like children in the aluminum-tinted rain, craving these fat beef wieners like nothing, like petals on a perspiring beefy wiener. The apparition of these faces in the plowed sunshine. I too dislike it. Its mistreatment of honey mustard and the rights of gun owners. Everybody knows NPR is chock full of these left-wing nut jobs whose bleeding hearts are stain resistant. And one day we will die, and our ashes will fly from a drone over Waziristan. I said to Fred, because I am always talking, I said, my lawn is dead. Because I am always talking, my heart bursts open like a bag of Smarties. The center of regurgitation cannot articulate this collapse. Things fall victim to all manner of grossness. I don't know the names of many places, but I know the names of a lot of places to puke in. Peripheral regurgitation, otherwise known as echoacoustical paranoia. I fucking quit. Yates regurgitates. I am, however, having a hard time working up material for this. I had considered recycling something to go with this video, but I thought it better to add some on-site construction, or rather like for the occasion written document. I've heard a couple comparisons of writing to vomiting. To follow this logic, if written output is vomit, then does that make the larger world of sensible phenomena a buffet or a drive-through? Like porn, we know it when we see it. Like a persnickety editor, the body sifts through the stomach contents for usable material. I Googled first, the center cannot hold, then disgusting regurgitation, to try to get a lot of words in front of me, with mixed results. As day has turned to night, proverbially speaking, I have shifted from lineated verse to prose. I started writing this at about 1, abandoning then going back to the big sheets of words I'd printed out. I put it down, and now I'm reading it for you. Thank you.
Awesome. That was fucking terrific.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
I almost forgot, this is the muse.
Yes.
This is our muse.
It is a muse. Tinfoil wadded into a...
Don't eat it, though.
Okay. Thank you very much, fellas. Well, thank you all very much for coming. And the last piece... No, not right now. Thanks. Just, I'll look at it. Yeah, much later. Thank you very much for coming. And the next piece... I want to thank all our performers for coming tonight and supporting and playing. Yes. The issue... We will be taking donations, and the issue is available in the back, and it includes a lot of artists who didn't perform tonight, whose work's really exciting. So I hope if you don't get one, you at least take a look at it. We will be hanging out here for a while, although it is getting rather late. It is, isn't it? So our last piece is next we're going to do an intermission, and this is Zav and I's life work. Zav didn't realize it was life work, but it is now. This is an excerpt from my life work. Just a brief excerpt. And it's called Intermission, and we're going to be doing a real intermission and a fake intermission, and you can decide which one's the real one and which one's the fake one. But this is, so if I can draw your attention kindly, and it might be a little awkward, you could move your chair to the back of the room, and if you could just clear a little bit of space away from you. I'm going to attempt to do this now. This is my excursion into the genre of modernism, and it is a genre. It was all the rage in the English department when Mike and I were going to school. Modernism was hot. And we're going to be doing this, and it is an intermission, so if you feel that you need to, feel free what you need to do. So essentially, I look at this as a sort of not an anti-epic, but a non-epic, or perhaps the history of my ignorance. I like to phrase it, and it could go on forever, and it will go on forever. But it is meant to be something in the nature of perhaps furniture music. It's just here. It's just happening. It's also part game show. So, I don't know. It's called Intermission. Thank you, Zav. As you can see, the beautiful images. And I'd like to remind you to stick around because Zav will be showing projections of his new work after we do this incredibly piece. Okay, this is called Intermission or Verses. And there it is. It's beautiful. Look at that, the blue, the fade. It feels like you're in a rec room. You're in a rec room, it's the late 80s. You're thinking about things you haven't thought about before. This is my life work. And it is called Intermission. Or you could also call it verses, and it's a bad pun for one knows verses, a verse of poetry, or perhaps some sort of contest. So here we go. It's called Verses, and bear with me. Yeah, here we go. Verses. Gideon versus sales tax, Buddha versus Old Dixie, Madonna versus Nobo Daddy, Cavemen versus Darwin, Analog versus Digital. Basic versus Applied, Turner versus McCoy, Kramer versus Kramer, Zenith versus Panasonic, Regular versus Unleaded, Tropicana versus Premium, Rockies versus Marlins, Burns versus Homer, York versus Lancaster, Sox versus Yankees, Zeppelin versus Sabbath, Reagan versus Hardcore, Four-Wheelers versus Embryos, Acme versus Rosebud, Joe versus Isis, Ike versus Monty, Lincoln versus Douglas, Blake versus Einstein, Oxford versus Cambridge, Dartmouth versus Wasser, Guinness versus Ripley's, Tops versus Fleer, Toyota versus Cherokee, Odalisque versus Monolith, Evolution versus Portageon, Viet Cong versus Hootenanny, Congress versus Decepticons, Joe Hill versus Employee of the Month, El Dorado versus 76 Ford Pinto, Mandala versus Mirror Ball, Alignment versus Crankshaft, Courier versus Garamond, Mildew versus Magic Carpet Ride, Abraham versus Prospero, Marshall McLuhan versus Circuit City, Pinocchio versus Jonah, Pyrrhus versus Hannibal, Cerebus versus McGruff, Rupert Murdoch versus Big Bird, 12.7 versus 88.9, The Red Skull versus Ground Zero, LOI versus Mugwumps, Cenobites versus Jesuits, Xenomorphs versus Deadheads, General Custer versus the Trifids, Ralph Nader versus Milton Bradley, ladies and gentlemen, Delirium versus Waffle House, Flashbacks versus Buzzbins, the Hatsfields versus the McCoys, the Clantons versus the McLurys, the Clampets versus the Zuckermans, the Pistons versus the Supersonics, the Regulators versus the Moderators, the Montagues versus the Capulets, the Corleones versus the Tataglias, the Whigs versus the Lindolinians, Hoosiers versus Trotskyites, Wobblies versus Morlocks, the Jets versus the Sharks, Caesar versus Gauls, Turks versus Serbs, Goths versus Druids, Jaws versus Yuppies, Croakers versus Boonies, Hippies versus Preps, Maniots versus Cretans, Bloods versus Crips, Mods versus Rockers, Yanks versus Pollies, B-Boys versus Teddy Boys, Progs versus Jocks, Geeks versus Crooners, Rennies versus Techies, Slans versus Shoggoths, Tories versus Boogeymen, Maggots versus Juggalos, Britpop versus Darkwave, Post-Punk versus Methodists, King Herod versus the Young Elvis Stamp, Microsoft versus Bartleby the Scrivener, Fellaheen versus Class of '89, Diamond Jim versus Pony Express, Old Hickory versus Grand Slam Breakfast, Big Jim McLean versus General Fang, Springfield versus Color Wheel, Andrew Jackson versus Ghost Dance, Sherlock Holmes versus Bing Crosby, Oliver North versus Duke Nukem, Francis Scott Key versus Fu Manchu, Ben Franklin versus Otto von Bismarck, Buck Rogers versus Admiral Cockburns, Flash Gordon versus Jesse Helms, Flaming Creatures versus Presbyterians, Pocahontas versus King Kong, Solomon versus Prop 8, Archimedes versus Gandalf, Gwildor versus Orko, Minerva versus Jabba, Dave versus the Vending Machine, Hitler versus PBS, Mikowski versus WD-40, Giuliani versus Liberace, Colt 45 versus Opus number 12, Robert Stack Shaq versus Willie Horton, McWorld versus Jihad, Pop Art versus Dorm Room, Godzilla versus Mothra VHS, Baudelaire versus Mallrats, Coffee Clutch versus Ave Maria, W.H. Auden versus Coach Lombardi, Kant versus the Jabberwocky, Mr. Jones versus J. Alfred Prufrock, Jackson Pollock versus Screensavers, Stormtroopers versus Hi Mom, Stick Figure versus Coptic Insignia, Oedipus versus Hasbro, Ex-Boyfriend versus Mothership, Dada versus MoMA, Fluxus versus Dianetics, Canes versus Sega, Paramount versus Dreiser, Black Elk versus Narcissus, Azrael versus Showtunes, Greenspan versus Bluebeard, Napoleon Bonaparte versus the Cheshire Sphinx, Ichabod versus Jumping Jesus, Ivanhoe versus Dupree, Sir Newton versus Avalon, Dr. Moreau versus Dolly Parton, Dr. Faustu versus Rotwang, Lady Liberty versus Ectoplasm, Captain Nemo versus Dr. Kevorkian, and the Talmud versus the Necronomicon, Pope Gregory V versus Frederick II, Gunga Din versus McCarthy's Ghost, the Seawolf versus Heidi, Cambyses versus Amasis, Shell versus Pegasus, FDR versus the DuPont brothers, Father Flanagan versus the Cardinal Reclus, Lord Beaverbrook versus the Witches of Eastwick, Mon Pa Kettle versus State Farm Insurance, Ming the Merciless versus Oppenheimer, Leif Erikson versus Titanium Oxide, Jack Horkheimer versus Tommy Lasorda, Sitcom Roommate versus Personal Demons, Mike Wallace versus Billy the Kid, Ratfink versus Newt Gingrich, Pixelation versus Beach Bums, Bob Marley versus Che Guevara, Pepsi versus De Gaulle, 007 versus Taliban, Beowulf versus Xbox, Bolton versus UN, Heidegger versus Automation, Leadership versus Abomination, Hegel versus the Remote Control, Dirty Harry versus Empty Chair, Scumbags versus Everyman. Damn this. The Unborn versus Copyright, Wikipedia versus Too Obvious, Fox versus Too Obvious, Steve versus Too Obvious, Craig versus Too Obvious, Bush versus Too Obvious, Babylon versus Catchphrase, Gotcha versus Ditto, Banicula versus Motormouth, Xanadu versus Shareholders, Atlantis versus Taiwan, Euro Disney versus Bosnia, Quetzalcoatl versus Silicon Valley, Sleepy Hollow versus Wrigley Field, Burning Man versus Mordor, Ashland versus Sunnybrook, Haunchyville versus Muskego, Fox Point versus Figgly Wiggly, thank you, Middle Earth versus Food Club, Kettle Moraine versus the Moon of Endor, Walmart versus 7 Mile Fair, Epcot Center versus the Corn Palace, Lake Wobegon versus Ook Bar, Main Street versus Pangea, Arcadia versus Shangri-La, Shundi versus Narnia, Martha's Vineyard versus the Elysian Fields, Mayville versus Horicon, Waterford versus Lamira, blah, 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 blah. Eau Claire versus the River Devils, Shawano versus Sheboygan, Cayuga versus Pataki, Oneida versus Powerball, Fond du Lac versus Stillwater, Greendale versus Wauwatosa West, Muskego versus Ixonia, Chippewa versus Lake Center, Chippewa versus Libertyville, Roswell versus Chattahoochee, A-bomb versus Montage, prokaryotic versus eukaryotic, systolic versus diastolic, kerosene versus butane, corduroy versus shale, polymers versus fibers, empirical versus statistical, automation versus service fees, scroll down versus click here, USSR versus ILL, Walgreens versus Blue Cross, BP versus Voodoo, Ulysses versus Google's, GDP versus 8%, DNA versus FAQ, KFC versus FDA, MLA versus the APA, ACLU versus OPEC, Eurozone versus Thanos, Spencer Tracy versus Clarice Darrow, the People versus H&R Block, the People versus Standard Oil, the People versus Lawrence Lung, the People versus the Frog Prince, the People versus the Lower Court of Appeals, the People versus Atlantic Enterprise, Commonwealth versus Pullis, Commonwealth versus Hunt, Next Wave versus the FCC, AT&T versus the FCC, Citizens United versus FEC, FEC versus Wisconsin's Right to Life, MAC versus PC, APA versus Booker T, TV versus ESP, EPA versus the GOP, APA versus IRS, BBC versus SSC, FBI versus BIG, ISO versus SLP, BMI versus ASCAP, Vorticism versus Software, Pilgrim versus Bootleg, Server versus User, WWF versus WCW, ACDC versus 30 UPCs, AIM versus Lone Rangers, MGM versus Grokster, IMF versus S&P, PTO versus HM, Mac versus PC, Roe versus Wade, Bub versus PAL, Fads versus Waifs, Calyx versus Inertia, Chronos versus 2.0, Sample versus Ratio, Byte versus Flow, Themis versus Index, Adonis versus Ishtar, Nike versus Zulu, Franco versus Vishnu, Ford versus Chevy, Teaser versus Trailer, Apes versus Clot, Monad versus Dicot, Plots versus Wages, Passage versus Status, Bio versus Livery, IAM versus Dactyl, Atom versus Ion, versus Mom, Wamba versus Orko, Gia versus Zool, Gaps versus Resume, Nape nature versus nature, nurture versus nature, mono versus dual, polis versus prophecy, chronology versus sorcery, loopholes versus CO2, scars versus links, form versus latex, puns versus dumps, forums versus panels, flubs versus zingers, clue versus risk, user versus server, Atman versus mojo, anon versus grid. There's another 30 pages of it.
And don't forget Barack Obama versus Mitt Romney.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm trying to forget. Wait, there's one more. Let it run. Wait, it's really suspenseful. It's coming. Just hold on. Roe v. Wade versus Roe versus Wade. Roe v. Wade versus Roe versus Wade. And those are verses. Those were, that was examples of verses of poetry. So thank you very much. Please hang out. I believe we might be getting a very surprise call tonight from a Mr. Andy Positive, who is a poet extraordinaire. Does he live in Fort Atkinson? Where does Andy Positive live? I don't remember.
Yeah,
Fort Atkinson, yeah, he might be calling in and DJing for us.
By the Rock River and writes poems in his condenser.
In his condensery. Thank you very much for coming. I deeply appreciate you coming and supporting exceptional artists here. And thank you for coming and listening. I appreciate it.
Yeah, he's got to call back. Can you get him to call back right now? I don't know if I have his new number. Maybe he kept his old number.
Oh, I would like to remind you that issues of OW #1 are available. I'm going to go sit over there, so if you want to buy one, and you really should.
Looked good. I like the last video. I didn't get a chance to see it. I was like running around. What I saw looked pretty good.
That's the protein I was talking about.
Oh wait, you were using a video camera. That was just a decoy.
No, that was. Oh, I see. And then for a second, because the amount of time of video versus the amount of time of varied a lot depending on how fast it goes.
Right.
So for a couple seconds, I stopped.
Oh, yeah. And the rebound. I like that part. Oh, you can give this immediately.
I'll see you later. Thank you.
All right, Carl, good to see you. He's supposed to call in, but he was supposed to DJ over the phone. Yeah, we'll see. He's a little grumpy, I heard. Oh, yeah, right. Phone jockey. Where are you guys going? Where are you going?
You don't know.
Okay. Oh, okay.